Professor Kibwana has served in Parliament. He has been a member of Parliament for Makueni between 2002 and 2007. He has served in the cabinet. He was a Minister for Lands and Settlements and also Minister for Environment and Natural Resources. He then, in the second term of the Kibaki presidency, served as the President's advisor on constitutional and parliamentary and youth affairs. Remember, this is the period when we now got the new constitution in the second term of the Kibaki presidency. You can imagine the president's advisor on constitutional parliamentary affairs was very, very involved in the conversation around the new constitution. But before that, even for the past 2 decades, the previous 2 decades before that, Professor Kibwana was really involved in pushing for a new constitution, in the conversations for what the new constitution should look like. He was the convener and the founder of what was called the NCEC, that is the National Convention Executive Council. He was a spokesperson. He had come up with an organization called the Center for Law and Research International. This is a man who has worked in public service, worked for the public for many years. So by the time we were deciding, let me go and serve as the governor of Makueni County, he was going to implement some of the ideas that he had, some of the issues that he thought a government should do for its people, and that is what he exactly went to do. Professor Kibwana, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning to you, Professor. Morning. Welcome to the Situation Room.
Yeah, that is a big team, a war team.
Yes, it's a whole team. It's a whole room.
Yes.
So, Professor, we'll get straight into, discussing the issues of, I've just given a brief background of who you are, what you've done in terms of serving the public. Even before that, you've taught law, you're a professor of law, you've taught law, you have been the dean at the University of Nairobi in the Faculty of Law. You've done very many things, but there are many people who just see you as the Professor Kibwana, Governor, Makueni County. Just give us a brief, 2 minutes of your public service life.
Well, I think, first of all, I want to thank you for calling me to SPICE, and I know that SPICE is a very influential station in terms of influencing ideas in our country. I can say that all my life has been in public service, because after my studies at 23, I began to teach in a public university, the University of Nairobi. And I didn't want to practice law in the usual way in the private sector. I thought that I could use law for purposes of helping my country, our society. And that is why a big chunk of my earlier life was about agitating for the return of multipartyism, agitating for a new constitution, because the independence constitution had been reviewed too much. And then I taught for 25 years in the University of Nairobi, and also leading in terms of during those tumultuous days when students, there was a lot of unrest, and I tried to work with young people to in the NGO sector as well to protect them, because those days when they were demonstrating, they got hurt a lot. Some of my friends got killed. So subsequently, in terms of now working within government, I did that. It was not always easy, but we enjoyed serving under Kibaki, because he was somebody wanting to reform the country's economy to get our country back on track. And then, of course, currently working in Makueni, it's a pleasure, because you are working with people, you are in a space where you can co-create development matters with them, lay a foundation for the state. So really, I have been public life because I never quite got into the private sector in terms of practicing as a lawyer as such.
Now, you are serving as governor of Makueni, and we are currently fighting a global pandemic, and it's a health emergency. Makueni has been touted as one of those that are miles ahead of other counties in terms of rolling out healthcare and improving the healthcare infrastructure. Now, as we look at the reopening and the easing of the restrictions, and people now leaving Nairobi and leaving Mombasa and coming home to Shags, they'll be getting into Makueni. Counties are being advised that now be prepared to take up some of the load that was being handled in Nairobi and Mombasa. How prepared is Makueni?
I think we have tried our best. It's not easy because we have almost 250 kilometers of the Nairobi-Mombasa highway. In Kenya, I think that's the longest stretch. And because of the truck driving and all that, we are challenged on a daily basis by the pandemic. But initially, we got our medical staff trained because this is a new thing. So you have to get them through the protocols of dealing with a new disease. That we did. Unfortunately, we had the staff who had worked in DRC during Ebola. So he was very instrumental toward helping the others. Mm-hmm. And we did something else, which is a bit special, because in Makueni we have what one could call a citizens' government, because they elect themselves from villages. We have 43 villages, and they are there for those development leaders. And we were able to train about 50,000 people, both development committee people as well as community health workers, so that they can go into each household. They can tell them about the do's and don'ts of COVID-19. They can see who doesn't have livelihood. They can see the ones who are unwell, like diabetes, those diseases that make people more prone to COVID. So we have that movement, and each one of those people is in charge of 5 of our 250,000 households, so that they can help us. We, as Minister Mutahi Kagwe came to see yesterday, we have also a unit of treating at water headquarters, and we have a unit that we are working with KMTC in Makindu, and already we have over 300 beds now for treating people. We actually manufacture oxygen in Makueni, so we have that in supply. And finally, we are going into now the schools, because we are thinking that particularly people will be quarantined and so on, will be many. So we are going into also schools so that we have space there, since they won't open soon. And we are focusing more now on home-based care for those who are not seriously unwell, because we think the numbers will surge. And one still must say, with all the difficulties, the Minister of Health and the President are trying their very level best, because I will not deny them credit. They are trying their very best, and it's just the money to flow to the counties so that we are more ready.
Right. A pleasure to hear you, Governor. And when you use words like co-create in development and citizens' government, that warms the cockles of my heart. But then my question is at the wider county level, and from a point of view of the Council of Governors and the country response, to what extent is this community level response really being taken up by other counties, and to what extent is the Council of Governors championing this as an essential part of the response to COVID?
Of course, in terms of the County Government Act, in terms of the Constitution, public participation is an imperative. And that's the best way to really do development, to involve people in it, so that they are real stakeholders. Many counties are trying to create the institution of community health workers, maybe in terms of this development infrastructure of citizens. That's work in progress in a lot of the counties. But given our conversation together at COG, given now the necessity of home-based care, because of the numbers that we are likely to get, particularly after the opening as evidenced in other countries abroad, I think this is something that even in today's meeting of COG, this is something that we are saying we must go that route of involving the community itself to be at the front line of the fight against this pandemic. But you're right in terms of it is something that is happening unevenly as of now, but we are together trying to work on it.
Governor Kibwana, even before COVID, what would you say was your attention? Where was the attention for you as a leader of the county in terms of what needed to be given attention when it came to development or infrastructure or anything like that?
I think our focus of development is precisely even the ideas we are borrowing in terms of facing COVID. In terms of we think about our development together. When we have public participation for our budget, from our population of about 1 million, we get before COVID, when matters were completely public, we get about 100,000 people from the village to what we call a cluster, several villages together, to sub-ward, to ward, to sub-county, to the county itself. So we decide what is it that we want to do together. Of course, because it's a system that is beginning, it has its challenges like all systems that begin. So we do that. Then when we decide what is to be done in a particular area, we have, again, a citizen committee to be in charge on a daily basis. And you can't be paid, for example, if that citizen committee does not approve, as people approve, as the county administration approve. So with that kind of framework, we also now decided how do we deal particularly with our agriculture. We know that agriculture has done badly when we de-emphasized extension services, so that's something that we decided we want to revive. And we also thought value addition is essential, and that's why we focused on we have fruits. We have most mangoes in the country. So we decided that we would have a fruit processing plant, particularly for mangoes to begin with, going now into juice with the assistance of the European Union. We do a lot of green grams. Actually, we are number 2 to Kitui. So also the people said, let's have pulses, a processing plant where, you clean them, you split them, you pack them, and that is about to get completed now at a place called Makindu. We did also some work on milk. So basically, we were saying, how do you add value to what you produce? And we are basically a nasal agricultural county. So that was a major thrust of our development, including other matters like universal health care. We were actually the county which was used to pilot universal health care, and we talk to people, we ask them, what do you want us to do? And people have ideas, and then we try as a government the best way we can. Of course, we prioritize integrity, and we were able, in the first year, we got first 2 years, we got bad audit reports when we were beginning. Subsequently, by 2017-18, with Nyandarua, we had a clean audit report. We ran a system of open contracting so that every information about contracting is open. You can't hide it. So if you make a mistake, that mistake is there permanent, and people are afraid to do that, so that there is openness. So integrity also is something that we prioritize.
Professor, I wanted to ask something. I actually have followed your career, and it's exemplary. Now, this matter of community health workers, what I wanted to know is, are they people who have some health background, or are they lay people?
These are lay people who get trained, and who get trained so that they are like the first level of healthcare delivery in the community. This is something that is very well done in Ethiopia, in Africa. It's done very well in India, a bit in Rwanda. And these community people are there to make sure that for our 235 facilities, having a community health unit so that each one of them is responsible for so very many households. So they make sure that people have got immunization. They make sure that people who are on ARVs are doing that. They make sure that family planning is going on well. They make sure that if you are sick and you don't want to go to hospital, they make sure that happens. If a mother is expecting and they are supposed to go to clinics, they make sure that happens. They before the dispensary, they are the second level after the household, because even the household itself must take care of its health, nutrition matters, and so on. So then the community workers, and we have been lucky because with people like AMREF, they have helped us to train these people. So we have been lucky, very lucky.
How many are there in total?
Currently, we have 4,240 of them in Makueni. We don't pay them, except now we want to explore that. In a place like Kakamega, Governor Oparanya's county, there's a bit of stipend extended. And so this is within this financial year, we are thinking of a little stipend. Before, we used to help them with income generation. Income generation matters, like some border, so that as they travel to motorcycles, as they travel to the hospital, to the households, then they can also make a little bit of money, getting them into like some gardens in some of the doing a bit of agriculture. But we thought that we should supplement that with now being able to give a little stipend so that it's easier.
In the Situation Room is Eric Latif, CT Muga Nduoko, and Wanjiru Gikonyo.
And Governor, we know there is the health side to the pandemic, but there's also the livelihood side. And my question would be, how are livelihoods affected in Makueni? But also, in view of your declaration that you'll be running for presidency, which many people welcome, what would you do with regard to securing livelihoods? The many Kenyans who have been affected by the pandemic and are hungry. What would you practically do to ensure that those needs are met as we deal with the ravages of the pandemic?
I think, first of all, when it comes to the economic side, we are focusing a lot in terms of doing blueprints for post-COVID. And yet one has to deal with the situation right now during COVID itself. And I think with this kind of partial opening that has happened, people have to be creative. And I think, for example, in Nakuru, Governor Lee Kinyanjui was creative in terms of, if it is market where most of the people trade, you make sure that there is social distance. You can do it in a way so that that stream of livelihood is not cut. And that is something we went to Nakuru. We saw what was happening, and we said in Makueni. Now, even before now, the partial opening, we want to do that. Of course, there is the easy route of trying to help vulnerable groups, and we have been trying to do that. If it's old people, if it's persons with disability, we have been trying to do that in Makueni. And of course, we are very, very lucky because the previous rain and this rain, we got some good food, so at least people had food. But these palliative solutions, I think it has to go basically to what you do so that the economy that we have is shared among all our people, so that even when there are emergencies, there are pandemics and all that, people are reasonably secured. And that's a broad topic. Some of what one wants to institute in terms of when they are in leadership, of course, with other like-minded, progressive, reform-minded people. And the problem with our economy, even as we say that we have we grow 5 to 6% in normal years, most of that economy is in very few hands. So the idea is in my presidency to democratize the economy, to socialize the economy, to, for example, land, to make land available so that there's no land which is not being used for production, because there's a lot of idle land. People just have land and they don't use it. Either you tax them or you get them to ensure that this land is put into production.
You have touched on land, actually. Before you even go further, you say that you're starting on land, as you know, is an emotive subject. And
Yes.
if your presidency wants to ensure that all available and usable land is put to use, how
Yes.
do you do that?
First of all, we of course respect people who have legitimate titles to land, meaning that they have not taken public land. We respect that. You must respect that, because we believe in clean business. We believe in people making wealth so that we can share it. People get jobs and all that. But if you have land and you are doing nothing with it, either you need to be taxed so that you realize that you just can't keep land without using it. And there are many mechanisms that can be used so that any land is put to productive use. For example, in the rural areas, you get parents who don't give land to the youth so that the youth can do agriculture. So again, we would have to find a mechanism for that to happen. I know it's a motive. I was a minister of land before, and that is one thing that we would have to look at. I'm not saying that I would take away land from people who have a legitimate titled land, not at all. But it doesn't make sense. You have a resource as important as land where we can do a revolution in agriculture, and people just sit on it. They just wait for it to be more, to have
To appreciate
more
in value.
and
Yep.
and then they sell it. I think that's something that, because we will be co-creating a state, we will be reinventing this state together, and I will be getting these ideas from people. We say, this is the problem. How do we deal with it? And one of the things that you asked me earlier in terms of the specificity of Makueni, like we said to ourselves, we must include youth in our economy. These are times and going forward. And so for every project that we have what we call apprentices. We have youth working with the technical people, with the community people in that project. They are learning, they are earning something. We have interns who also are learning and earning something. So you have to really be creative in hard times to incorporate as many people as possible into the remnant economy, so to speak. But ideally, the issue is, how do you now grow an economy where there is a lot of domestic production? Because we emphasize a lot of export and all that. How do you do an economy so that it's not based on tenderpreneurs or policypreneurs?
Yeah.
People who make cartels and that's it.
Yes, Governor. The question I was asking is, if you were president now, and we know people are out of jobs, we know there are people who are hungry, we know there are people who are not earning, what would you do to ensure that you cushion, that you protect livelihoods? And do you feel that is already happening?
I think there is a problem with that. That is not happening in terms of the monies that we are mobilizing for COVID. You can mobilize money not just for the health aspect. You can mobilize money so that, like now, people are restarting their businesses, like their hotels and so on. And there is no, they used all the savings that they had.
Yeah.
So you can make monies available to them. For example, we have something we call a Tedeka Fund at 3%, which people are borrowing, so that you do stuff like that. There's the small businesses, SMEs, you extend that. I like the way of the taxes a bit, like the VAT and so on. But in our situation, for example, says we are not, people are bringing produce or taking produce away from Makueni. We don't charge that. Also, the vulnerable people, you can use the monies that we are getting for COVID or we have put aside for COVID. So it is being intentional. It is being intentional and looking who is likely to hurt, who are hurting, and devising ways of directly engaging them with economic possibility. And I think that is not happening as much as it should. That is something that we don't just think about post-COVID. We need to think now because we are not sure how long we are going to be with COVID.
Good points. And as we continue this conversation, Governor, it's time for us to take another quick break, take a look at traffic, what's happening on the roads. We'll see if we can, detect anything that's happening on the 47 kilometers that Makueni shares with Mombasa Road. And then we come back and continue the conversation with Professor Kivutha Kibwana, the governor of Makueni County, a man who's already come out and said, I would like to be president of the Republic of Kenya. And we are focusing now our questions into what is it that you would do that would serve the people of Kenya that deserves their vote.
Do you think that this is enough to extrapolate to a national level and the same successes then would be realized if you were to be president? Do you think what you've done in Makueni is enough to take to the national level?
I think some of what I've done in Makueni in terms of showing that what happens in one county can also happen in all counties and therefore in the country. But I'm drawing from other experience, having been part of constitution making and having known what the constitution wants to happen in our country in terms of, first of all, simply following what the constitution says, following what the law says, because that alone would help a lot. Just making sure, for example, all those rights are followed. Like we saw Sabasaba, how young people who are simply saying they want better, being confronted by the police. So that, we say, is it not possible to have a human rights state where rights are respected, the constitution is respected, law is respected, the institutions which check each other, they should be independent and all that. So there is that. Then there is my understanding of revolution, because if we made sure that there isn't the corruption that there is, and we say that we now will not we will not permit corruption, and therefore we have more money. Like 1 year EACC said in 2018, about 800 billion shillings were lost. And that's like twice how much money we get as counties. So if, again, you make more money available, and I believe in integrity, we are working as much as we can to uphold that. So I was a minister in a government. I was, I worked under Kibaki, a great Kenyan whose father was a tobacco guy, a tobacco seller.
And seller.
So, yes. I worked there. So there is that experience. I used to, at the international level, be president of the Climate Change Convention. So there is that experience, and some of what we have done in Makueni, in terms of trying to say that you can actually get devolution to work. You can work with the people so that you listen to their voice, so that what we are saying, we co-create things with them. You don't just think that their people are told what to do. So I actually believe that I will work with Wanjiku, I will work with all of us, every Kenyan, and that Kibwana is the real hustler. Kibwana is the real people's president.
Hustler notwithstanding, Professor, what would you say are the reasons behind your success or successes?
First of all, it's believing in people, believing in the dignity of people, believing that Kibwana, any Kenyan is equal to the other Kenyan, believing that there isn't a small community and a big community, believing that all sectors, whether, person is a person with disability, whether somebody is of what gender, of what region, of what class, believing that it is possible for all of us to really do the Harambe that we talked about at the beginning of our independence. So that just believe and faith in people, so that I feel comfortable when I'm with whoever. Then believing that one of the biggest resources in our country, in our continent, is the youth. And I did a lot of youth work with youth at the university, in civil society, in Makuene now. We are trying. And harnessing that resource. Some of our young people are doing things that harm them because they are not seeing opportunities. So also working with that big segment, almost 60% or so of our population. So I really think that Kibwana, who really wants a difference of the 57 years or so, a market difference, of course appreciating that from the beginning Kenya has not collapsed. Some African countries collapsed totally under military rule and so on and so forth. And therefore saying, yes, we have had this history, we could have done better. We wish we didn't discontinue devolution in 64. And then saying, let us not concentrate too much in the past and cry too much about the past. Let's go forward and let's succeed.
But also, let's pepper it with some reality, Professor. You've served in government, you've served in the cabinet at the highest level of government, you've served in Harambe House as the president's advisor for years. So you therefore know that there's this machinery called government and there's something called the system. That for you to be able to achieve all these things that you're talking about, a human rights state, to talk about a co-creation where public participation is very important, you have to tear down some seriously, deeply entrenched structures. How would you go about that? Changing us from the current to this new that you want to bring?
When we were trying to do the constitution, and I was in charge of, I was a spokesperson for the National Convention Assembly and the National Convention Executive Council, NCC. It was a question of negotiation. It was a question of consensus building. Some people would say, don't touch this. And we would say, there's reason to do that. There is reason for change. The people that we say are below, the people we call grassroots, and so on, they're getting tired. They want a piece of the Kenya, a piece of the cake. So in 2002, when Kibaki took over, we saw the people even wanting to arrest police who are doing bad manners. And so it means that with that power of Wanjiku, with this thinking that we need to go to another level, we will negotiate. And I know it's not easy work. I know it is not easy work at all, but many people are reasonable. Many people will see that there is the reason to change track. And these are things I'm thinking about. These are things I'm reading about. These are things I'm reflecting about. And of course, it's not just me, Kibwana, because Kibwana is just one fellow. And it will be, we are saying we are doing a movement. Even in terms of our campaign, it will be a campaign done by our people, by volunteers from all over the country to have all these ideas. And I think when we put these ideas on the table and we negotiate with whatever group, because if you demonstrate that there is possible prosperity for all, and if you have had advantage, we are not saying that we will deny you that past advantage, but of course, if some things were done very badly, we'll say no. Some of these have to be corrected, and going forward, we commit to political hygiene, we commit to good manners, good political manners.
Governor.
So I know it's hard, but it will be done. It can be done.
Yeah, Governor, great. So you want to deal with the deep state. That's your first barrier. The deep state will work against you. The other barrier is Kenyans are hardwired to engage with the deep state. we believe in political demagogues. And so when you talk about the dignity of the people and, looking really at that aspirational person that we should be, the reality is on the ground, we are far from that. Kenyan voters are not ready to get into movements. They expect politicians to do for them. So you have a problem of dealing with the deep state, but also the Kenyan voter. How palatable is, do you think you can re-engineer what you did in Makueni on a national scale with the mindset of voters as it is at present?
Unfortunately, we don't have an option. And I think even the young people who are in this social justice movement, the young people who in rural areas have no opportunities and so on, it's a reality because either you have a peaceful change or you go the way of Arab Spring and the way of what has happened elsewhere. And in Makueni, we found that people did not trust politicians. There's very low trust. But because of engaging them, because of saying that we really want to do things that they believe will change their lives, it's a gradual process with a lot of civic education. And that is why I'm saying that this campaign of 2 years is also going to be a civic education campaign, so that we ask, what have these demagogues, what have they done for you? They excite you, election season. And after that, they don't really do much thereafter. So we are going to do that. And I know it's not easy, but it has to be done. And I have said that that's part of what we want to do together.
Yeah.
And there are many forces in the country who are thinking of change. So it is going to be all those groups coming to the fore, and all those forces together now with the people. Because I know there's that ethnic thing where people are told, we represent this ethnicity and so on. But they're also getting tired, and they're seeing that route is not bearing much fruit. But we are going to have a shallow state. We are going to have a state where really it's a human right. One can say you're idealistic, Kibwana, but unfortunately in Africa, like in Ghana, they are doing that. In Africa, in Ghana, they are doing that. Young Sankara was doing that. So it's doable.
Possible.
And it is possible, and it's actually the only option.
As we get to let you go, Mr. Governor, we understand that you have another meeting. The conversation that's happening now politically is around the BBI and some of the changes that the BBI is proposing. When this rally took place in Kitui, you were there and you were speaking very much in support of what has been proposed in the BBI. Do you see that as adding to what you say as a shallow state going into the future in your presidency? The kind of structural adjustments that are being proposed in the way we govern ourselves?
That's a very, very good question. With Kiraitu, I was the representative of the COG, Council of Governors, in constitution making, the review of the constitution. And of course, things that we were interested in was how devolution would be deepened. Those were our basic interests. We are waiting for the BBI report. We will scrutinize it. I will scrutinize it. If it takes anything from the 2010 constitution, then one cannot accept that. If it takes anything away from devolution, one cannot not accept that. I think it must go through a referendum so that Wanjiku, Atieno, Amina, all and Amisi, all the Kenyans are able to vote on it as they voted on the 2010 constitution and even voted 2005. So the idea of taking it through parliament, that idea is not palatable. So we will look at it. And now, since this is the final document, it's unfortunate that the process was not as elaborate as the process for the 2010 constitution.
Yeah.
But we will look at it now finally, and we will make I will be able personally to pronounce on it. We will make a decision together. But if the idea is simply to have positions which only that, and they are expensive and all that, and it's not done through a referendum, and it dilutes the pollution, then one cannot accept that.
Finally, Bwana Kibwana, you're interested in being the president. So I'm going to just ask you this question directly. A powerful prime minister or not?
The parliamentary system usually, where there is proportional representation, where there is gender equity, that normally is a good thing. But this idea also of having two centers of power, so that somebody saying I am powerful, the other one, because even we are seeing with the president and deputy president, we are seeing some challenges there.
Yeah.
So one has to be careful how you structure your executive so that you don't set yourself up for conflict. But let this BBI come and we look at it, and we have to be convinced that this is for Wanjiku.
Thank you very much, Governor Professor Kivutha Kibwana, for speaking to us from Makueni County. We want you to come into the studio so we can spend an entire hour having a full-on discussion on this and other matters.
I thank you very much for this interview, and I am going to have a very spicy day.
Fantastic.
Oh,
Thank
yeah,
you.
sugar and spice and everything nice for your day. Asante sana, Professor. Have a good one.
Asante.